The Trump administration and Harvard traded jabs yesterday during a pivotal court hearing over the government's threats to cut billions of dollars from the university's federal research funding. Harvard attorneys accused the Trump administration of violating its First Amendment rights by freezing those funds, claiming the White House is trying to dictate how the school operates. The Justice Department argued Harvard violated the Civil Rights Act by failing to address anti-Semitism on campus and claimed the government has the authority to cancel the grants after determining the funding did not align with the administration's priorities of combating anti-Semitism. U.S. District Judge Allison Burroughs questioned how the Trump administration could make ad hoc decisions to cancel these grants without offering evidence that any of the fund research is actually anti-Semitic. The judge called the government's claims mind-boggling, asking how cutting off medical research funding could help fight anti-Semitism. Trump lashed out at the judge then on social media and slammed Harvard, claiming his administration, quote, will not stop until there's victory. Both Harvard and the government were seeking summary judgments here to avoid a trial. It's unclear exactly when Judge Burroughs is expected to issue her ruling. Let's bring in co-anchor of CNBC's Squawk Box and New York Times columnist Andrew Ross Sorkin. Andrew, you've been tracking this Harvard story for a while now. Where do you see things going from here?
Well, so here's the complicated part. You heard from the judge yesterday calling this whole thing mind-boggling, which would suggest that there could be a ruling in favor of Harvard. Having said that, that might be a short-term win in what might turn out to be a longer-term war, if you will. The president even indicating in that Truth Social post that this is not something that would end. Therefore, he and the White House likely would appeal. And so the bigger question is, how long does this go on for? Even if Harvard does win, what does that say about money getting to Harvard or not? And in the interim, depending on how long this plays out for, what science projects and efforts are not going to be underway? What has been put on pause? How long can they keep some of this staff on the staff? And I think those are sort of the bigger questions here that have much longer term implications, not just for Harvard itself, but for society, given so many of the benefits that we have all that have all inured to us in many ways from the efforts that some of these both professors and scientists and others have engaged in over the years using government and taxpayer money.
Yeah, Lauren Leader, there's two issues that are being mushed together here by the Trump administration and in this courtroom. It's the idea of federal funding for research at universities like Harvard, but then also the need to combat anti-Semitism on college campuses. You've spoken at length about both of those topics. Can you unwind them for us here a little bit? Because it doesn't really seem like one is actually related to the other, which is exactly what the judge is seizing on.
Yeah, they're not. And I think that's part of the problem here, right? Like, you can feel very strongly about the failure of Harvard and other major institutions to protect Jewish students over the course of the last year. And obviously, I've been very vocal on this. I think that the institutions just abjectly failed. It's maybe one of the few areas in which I vehemently agree with some people on the other side that I don't agree with on anything else, but I agree with them on this. That said, it's this sort of like blatant transparency. Cutting off cancer research, cutting off dollars that fuel the future of medical innovation in this country for tens of millions of people, not just here, but around the world, is absurd and completely self-defeating and has nothing to do with the larger governance issues at Harvard or Columbia or anywhere else. And that's a problem. There's an amazing story, I think, in the Times today about the cutting off of research for the very condition that apparently the president now suffers from, which is this whatever, I don't know the medical term, but his swollen ankles and his swollen hands are tied to a medical condition. That's one of the things on the chopping block at Harvard should these grants be canceled. So it's just total overreach. And I think most Americans understand it. They're very worried about the cutoff in cancer research and other things. It has long-term implications.
Yeah, very long-term implications. Andrew, I want to get you on something else. It's an instance of a social media post now born into policy, because Coca-Cola said this morning it will launch a version of its signature drink made with U.S. cane sugar. The announcement came after President Trump posted last week on Truth Social that he had been speaking to Coca-Cola about using real cane sugar in Coke in the U.S. and that they've agreed to do so. Your thoughts?
Again, this is an example of the president using his power, influence, whatever you want to call it, to put companies or pressure companies to do things that he wants. Coca-Cola does sell Coca-Cola in Mexico using cane sugar, not the high fructose corn syrup that we're all used to in the U.S. And what happens this morning? Coca-Cola says, OK, we're going to do that. Now, just to be clear about it, all Coca-Cola in the U.S. is not going to be using cane sugar. There's not enough cane sugar in the U.S. to make all of this happen. It's also unclear what the cost of that is ultimately going to be, how much consumers are going to be charged, and what percentage of Coca-Cola, if you will, and if there's going to be a different name for it or what it's going to look like. But I think we're going to see cane sugar Coca-Cola. Some people will decide that that's a better version of Coca-Cola. Others may like the old Coca-Cola. I still like Diet Coke.
I was going to say, you've got some big Diet Coke aficionados sitting here with you, Molly Jong-Fast and I included in that. I do want to get you on one quick thing, non-Coca-Cola related, before we go here, and it's the fact that automakers have their eyes on earning reports this week and the idea that potentially the impact of tariffs could start being seen by some of these giants in that field. What are you looking for there? What are they telling you?
So we're already starting to see a lot of commentary around just the worries about tariffs. And I should say, even though General Motors, for example, beat estimates today, the estimates had been taken down prior, in part because of the tariffs. And when you listen to these conference calls and you see what some of these companies are saying, they are starting to worry about what the future looks like, what 25% tariffs ultimately means. So many of these cars are made outside of the United States, in Mexico and Canada. And so I think that concern is real. You're seeing some of the stocks fall on the back of that news, and that's something that we're just going to have to continue to watch.
We'll certainly stay watching that. CNBC's Andrew Ross Sorkin, thank you for coming on. Co-founder and CEO of All In Together, Lauren Leader, thank you as well.